Super Mario Kart on the SNES will often be considered the granddaddy when it comes to kart racing games, and I too would agree with that. It made me fall in love with the genre, and I've had countless memories of playing it into the early hours of the morning with friends way back in the day during marathon gaming sessions on summer holiday nights. It was on the Nintendo 64 eras, however, where I personally feel the genre peaked. Helped in a big way by the console's 4-player ready hardware, which made it more accessible than it had ever been at any time in the past, and it was a great way to show the technical upgrades that the new generation of consoles could allow these games to be presented. Whilst having a relatively small selection of pure kart racers, the Nintendo 64 has perhaps two of the most important ones, even to this day. And so for today's video we're taking a look at the Nintendo 64's 5 kart racers. As always, if you're wanting a full review of any of these games, then check out the link in the description where I will go into more depth. Diddy Kong Racing, as many of you will already be aware, is one of my all-time favourite games. It's a game which I still enjoy playing in this day and age as much as I did when I was a teenager, which shows just how timeless this gem of a title is. Seemingly coming out of nowhere, the game took the press by surprise when it was revealed. Inviting a select number of journalists into a private location, Rare revealed that not only was this new kart racer fully playable, it was going to be hitting store shelves imminently in time for Christmas 1997. Although the studio's ultimate aim was to make the game faster than Mario Kart 64, this wasn't achieved due to using polygons rather than sprites. But few could argue that DKR didn't have some pretty amazing tricks up its sleeve. For a single player kart experience, there's nothing else that beats it on the system. With the adventure mode packed full of varying challenges, cool boss battles and multiple vehicle types, it felt like a real world for you to explore and find secrets within. Not something that had been seen in this genre before. As you progress through the adventure mode, you'd unlock new characters, amazing worlds, and even with the tricky silver coin challenges, it always had this addictive feel from start to finish. With some great graphics which are on par with Rare's other work on the console, and music by David Wise that's packed full of catchy tracks that I still think of and still bring back memories even to this day, I can really say this takes me back instantly to the late 90s. There are some negatives to the game, however. The multiplayer mode just isn't as refined as it perhaps could and maybe should have been. You have your standard races and battles, but they just aren't as fun when compared to playing these with friends when you look at the other titles on this rundown. This is because there's very little balancing throughout the action. Simply put, it's unlikely that someone who's a noob to this game would stand a chance against someone that's been playing this game for a few years. The easiest summary for DKR is that this is the best single player kart racer around in my opinion, but if you're playing with friends then they may lose interest pretty quickly if you spent much time with this game in the past, because you should be beating them fairly easily. Mario Kart 64 was the first and perhaps the most loved kart racer on Nintendo 64. I remember to this day eagerly going into the basement where the local game shop resided at the time and asking if they had a copy of the game in stock yet, because things back then weren't much slower. Back then few people had the Nintendo 64 where I lived, so the store's main focus was on serving the PlayStation community in the local area. Luckily, however, they'd had some kid in a few hours earlier who traded the game in to get Killer Instinct, and so they had a used copy available, but the downside was that the box and manual looked like it had been hit by a blue shell on Toad's Turnpike. But by the end of that weekend in mid-1997, my brother and I had won all of the Grand Prix and had loved every minute of it. We would take turns as we were trying to 100% the game, and so with everything complete from a single player perspective, we began messing around with the battle modes. It was around this time that my dad, who was also into games, saw us playing it and picked up the third controller. The three of us there would play the Grand Prix and battle modes late into the night, sometimes before my sister became the fourth player in our group sessions. It must have been in the summer school holidays, but I distinctly remember the four of us playing Mario Kart and making a ton of noise and shouting at each other and generally winding each other up as we raced. My mum came into the living room at what must have been the early hours of the morning, complaining that we'd all made so much noise that we'd woken her up. But that's enough nostalgia for today, because from a multiplayer perspective, this is the one to own on the console. The rubber banding system that the game is known for means that even if you have someone who isn't all that great at games or is maybe playing Mario Kart 64 for the first time, my sister is a prime example, should easily be able to play and compete with those who are more experienced, because all it takes sometimes is a yellow star or a blue shell on the final lap and carnage can ensue. The track design is generally quite lenient also, and so the action relies more on a combat system than actual driving ability than you'd find in, say, Diddy Kong Racing. The emphasis on combat makes for a much more rounded multiplayer experience. You also need to take into account the battle stages, which are far superior to Rare's Simian Sideshow. It has all of the characters you know and love, a decent sense of speed, and some of the best tracks to ever appear in the Mario Kart series. We may now be years away from this game, but I still consider this and Mario Kart DS to be the pinnacle of the Mario Kart experience from a multiplayer point of view. LEGO Racers was kind of a big deal back in its day. As a huge multi-platform title, it's difficult to realise that at the time the games released, LEGO video games were a breath of fresh air. High Voltage thought so too as they developed LEGO Racers, which was released in 1999, but sadly it was released to mixed reviews. The most notable thing about LEGO Racers was the ability to create your own custom driver and kart. This was the main selling point of the game, and I remember magazines hyping the crap out of this feature way back. I too was sucking into the hype around this time, and being a big kart racing game fan, it was a feature that I'd been dreaming of having. This feature was perhaps a highlight of the game, but to get the really cool parts to build with you'd have to unlock them, which was the less interesting part and what really ruined the game for me. See, LEGO Racers is not a bad kart racer, it's just not a very good one either. As a single player experience you'll be racing in a series of cups in the fictional Legoland universe, whilst the courses are based on actual LEGO toy sets, they all feel too safe and there's not really much surprise here. Likewise, the multiplayer mode is another of the, well, run-of-the-mill number experiences, which is solid and somewhat competent, but if you have Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing in your collection, there's not really much of a reason to be in a hurry to own this title. It's also worth noting that being a multi-platform release, if you like what you're seeing here and you want the best experience, you're still better off getting the PC version, which received much higher reviews than the N64 port. Saying that, however, I personally like the graphics here. They're neither too sharp or too blurry, and the texture quality is above average, as too are the visual effects. The music isn't all that memorable, but the handling is what drove me insane. Being a kart racer you'd expect quick turns and nimble handling, LEGO Racers has some strange delayed turning system that makes it take forever to get to grips with, and just really feels out of place with what's become the benchmark standard for kart racers. Mickey Speedway USA is the often forgotten kart racer released by Rare in the year 2000. When news began to spread that Rare were working on another kart racer, we all assumed it was a follow-up to Diddy Kong Racing and were eagerly awaiting more news. Then, as tidbits of information began to leak out, it was clear that this was going to be something completely different than I or anyone else was expecting. If Diddy Kong Racing was Rare's game to push the genre forward, Mickey Speedway USA was the game to take it back to its roots. Gone is the huge open world adventure mode and short but sweet music tracks, and instead we're given a more linear experience akin to Mario Kart 64 single player experience with longer races. Mickey Speedway USA is a strange one for me personally because I'm such a huge fan of DKR. So that makes me feel like, well, I know this game isn't bad by any means, but look at how some of the reviews were at the time, it just didn't seem to have that high quality workmanship that I expected from a Rare game. The graphics are nice and it has a very soft cartoon styling to it, and the frame rate is rock solid, and at the higher engine levels the game zips along amazingly well with a fantastic sense of speed. However, the racing action is just a little dull, and no matter how many times I try to get excited to play the game, it quickly feels like a generic kart racer. But that is perhaps what Rare wanted and expected. After all, this was a quick project and one which didn't have their A-team when it came to staff members working on it. Take the sound for example. You typically expect Kirkhope or Beanland on the AAA Rare titles for the time, but this one was by Ben Cullum, who incidentally is the brother of none other than Jamie Cullum for any jazz enthusiasts around here. Now don't get me wrong, the music here isn't bad, it's just not on par with many of the other Rare games of the time. I also found the balance of weapons to be not good enough. To be honest, you're probably better off not trying to use the weapons at all, as you can have a better chance of winning races through pure racing. This is also true of the gold Mickey symbols, because by the time you collect enough for the boost, the race is likely to be over, so it makes them quite redundant. To be fair though, I'd still recommend this game though for a single player experience, but only if you're feeling burnt out by playing the two big kart races on the console. This game doesn't beat either of those, but it is a worthy alternative which, in a way, tries to take the best of both but manages to be better than neither title. South Park Rally takes my roundup this week to the bottom of the barrel, as not only is South Park Rally easily the worst kart racer on Nintendo 64, it's one of the worst kart races ever made. Coming at the height of the show's popularity, South Park Rally on paper should have been an absolute classic. Put the characters in karts, add some hilarious weapons, decent track design and a solid multiplayer mode, and this should have rivaled anything else in the genre. Instead, what we got was an absolute cluster of horrible design choices which hamper this becoming anything more than a joke. It's a game so bad that even the show's creators dismiss it. So how did Acclaim get this so wrong? Well, instead of sticking to the basics, they tried to create some kind of weird point-to-point racing experience with multiple routes to each point, which means it takes many attempts to even get to grips as to where you need to go to drive to in the races. Combine this with anyone who's never played the game before, and you're in for a multiplayer experience which will be a matter of races before it finishes because people will have pure frustration. Quite simply, the races aren't fun either on your own or with friends. The game does have some highlights however. The character selection is vast and covers all of your favourites from the early South Park seasons. The weapons too are just as crazy as you've expected and wanted, with my personal favourite being Saddam Hussein. The weapons however again are for fans that will get the inside jokes. Anyone who doesn't know the show or only had a passing interest in it will likely have no clue what many of the weapons are doing. Trying to rustle up some positives, because the ugly graphics and terrible sound make it hard to, I will say that there are many styles of races for those that do manage to find some enjoyment in the game. Sure, many of them fall into the standard race, capture an object or survival modes, but it is more racing and battling than you get in most kart races. But hey, this one's dirt cheap to pick up, and so it's worth a punt if you haven't played it before, or if you're a big fan of the OG South Park seasons. Then there may be something here that you'll be able to enjoy. And so there you have it, the roundup of the console's pure kart racers, and I'd love to know which one is your favourite and why. I'd also love to hear any memories and stories you have of any of these games, like I just shared with you, because these games, well, some of them at least, are so iconic. I'm sure you've got many memories of these that you'd like to share with other people in this channel's community. The console also had a load of car combat games, and so if you're interested in hearing more about those, let me know your thoughts, feelings, comments and opinions down below. And until next time.